he would actually read to her from a satanic children's handbook.
Forces in our world that are unseen, that are not good.
She's like, you don't see it. I go, no, I don't. And she's like, it's a big spider web and there's a spider hanging from it.
Hey, what's up, fam? I'm Adam Atchinson here with my friend and colleague, Aurelio Melendrez, and this is a continuation of our series, Real Spirituality, where we're just having some authentic conversations about spiritual matters that are prevalent, experiences that people have. A lot of this is just sharing some of our own stories of experiencing spiritual things and really talking about how the Christian faith and narrative has a resource to explain some of these things. And so we'd love for you, as you're thinking about your own spiritual experiences, that you would just consider with us that the Christian story and what we believe has a way to not only explain some of what we experience that is funky, that's paranormal, that's just can't be explained with normal sorts of everyday categories, but also provides a way forward, provides a resource for understanding that and moving forward in a way that's safe and healthy and good and life-giving. And so you have a really profound story that I happen to actually be a part of this one, and so why don't you tell a little bit of that story and we'll go from there.
So I had a good friend reach out to me. So he and his wife foster kids, foster adopt. And so they had a daughter that they adopted at about 2 to 3 hours right after birth. So they had a few of the other siblings already. So adopted this young girl, raised her in the house for a few years. And then my buddy reached out to me and said, hey, my wife and I have been kind of talking through some concerns and some thoughts that we have. They actually adopted her from a family that were satanic worshipers, members of the occult, and that, and if you remember, her name was B for Beelzebub. And so when Mom would take now Hope to visit with biological father, he would actually read to her from a satanic children's handbook. And the mom just told me, I remember how uncomfortable it was, how difficult it was, just what a dark, heavy spirit it used to feel like leave her feeling when she would leave those visits. Yeah. And so they shared it, got sent over to us. So I talked to them and they just said, hey, would you be willing to pray over her and with us? Because she wasn't really talking or engaging or connecting with the other kids in the house. And they just said there was something heavy about her. So, would you guys engage? And so we reached out and we ended up talking to them that one evening over the phone. And so you and I and Pastor Andrew Bogenwright prayed for them over the phone, just really being strong and binding the enemy and asking for God's help and freeing her of whatever had that hold on her. And so we got off the phone and my wife and kids were outside, so we hung up. I went outside and hung out with the family. And the next morning, I think that was on like a Tuesday, and the next morning, I just remember our house felt really heavy and couldn't really explain it. Thursday rolled around. And I remember my wife just going, I don't know what's going on. I'm just not feeling great. And I go, wow, maybe it's COVID. Like, we've been in the house now for a few days. Maybe that's what it is. She goes, I don't know. I can't explain it. It's just this sense of like sadness or something I got going on. And so Thursday we go to bed, and so I sleep with the window open. And Thursday morning, I remember it was about 4:30, 5 o'clock. My wife jumps out of bed and says, you need to close the window before it comes inside. And I kind of wake up. I'm like, I kind of look at her. I go, what before what comes inside? She says, you don't see that spider web on the window. And I said, no, like we have screens. And so she gets out of bed and runs around to my side. And what I noticed when I look over is that now both windows are open and the curtain is pushed all the way back. It felt like something out of a movie. And the left window doesn't open because it has an old slide bolt lock. The house is 100 years old. It doesn't open. The right side opens, but both of them were wide open. And so Erica runs to the window and she's looking out. She's like, you don't see it. I go, no, I don't. And she's like, it's a big spider web and there's a spider hanging from it. And I remember at one point kind of, wait, like, are you awake?
Like, okay,
you
honey.
all right, sweetheart? Like,
go back to sleep,
you need a few more hours. Yeah. Let's go. And she said, no, now it's over the neighbor's house. And then it kind of just drifted away. And I never saw it. I thought, maybe it's airplane, exhaust or something, because the little airport's not too far away. And so close the window like she asked me to, and we go back to bed. She woke up a few hours later and she goes, man, I feel incredible. Like, I just feel better. Like, I don't know what was going on, but I feel good. And I now felt terrible. Like, I couldn't even explain it. I was emotional all day. I remember at one point she came home from work. I went to get food for us, and I was just almost feeling like was having like, I'm not an anxious person, but having like an anxiety attack from what it's been described to me. And we were outside on our couch talking, and she asked, like, what are you feeling? And I go, I feel like a lightning rod. Like, I can't explain it. Like, there's this energy that's just leaving me really uneasy and just not at peace at all. She walks inside and I fall asleep on the couch, and I think she left me out there for like 3 hours. I just went out. And I come inside and she's on our bed, scrolling through something in her phone. And she just asked me, have you ever heard the name Beelzebub? And I just froze. I asked her why, right. Which means yes, right? Yeah. Husband translation, yes. Right. If I answer you with a question. And she said, I'm just kind of, doing what any good Christian would do. I'm Googling what I saw. And she said Beelzebub, and it said something about Lord of the Flies, but also can manifest or appear as a spider web, just kind of creating chaos. And I said, yes, I've heard that name. And she goes, oh, where? And I go, well, you remember 2 nights ago, or now 3 days ago, when I was in the house praying with the guys on the phone with that family? That was the little girl's birth name. Wow. And I just remember her jaw dropping and saying, like, I knew there was an explanation for whatever I was feeling. Sure.
Yeah. So, man, I want to just pause there, and really for those of you who are listening or watching, I think a lot of times we hear a story like that, and our first response is probably, what's the other explanation? Like, there's some skepticism, and I don't know if you've ever experienced something strange like this. Whether there's a name for it or a category for it that you have. But I would say, Aurelio, that knowing you, working with you, that most days, you're a pretty rational guy, right? I mean, most days.
Most days. Everyone has their day.
Right. But what was it that kind of led you to conclude that there wasn't another explanation, like that you'd almost exhausted the resources that you had to explain like what happened? And let me just start with the girl, and then you can talk about the same idea as you and your wife experienced, the sort of ramifications of that. If you think about the story that you told, this little girl was in their home from day one, right? So the environment,
a solid Christian family,
Christian family. And if I'm not mistaken, when this all was going down, the girl was only like she was still like young.
3, 4.
Young. And so we're not talking about a long history of things. But at some point, this family, who I would assume is relatively sane and rational themselves.
Very much.
That there were enough symptoms that at some point they said, we have to make sense of this somehow.
Right.
And had to go to a category or even at least reach out to some pastors at a church to help with. So, what was it for you that's like, this was something else? And
I mean, I think the very basic, like considering the source. Like the family is a family I trust, I've known, I have history with. It's not the kind of thing this happens every other week.
Right.
And so, we're working through that. That coincidences like Beelzebub. That's not a common like, hey, my wife and I are, hey, we're gonna play Pictionary today,
and just to be clear, she didn't know the kid's name,
and she had no idea what I was doing in the house on the phone. She thought it was just a meeting for an hour.
Good job communicating well with your wife, just how your day goes and stuff.
A lot of money in counseling to make sure that happened that way. So, but she could clearly read my mind. So why do I need to communicate? But
telepathy is another episode. So,
Oh man, I didn't even think what that would lead to. So it was just the look, and then in my wife, I mean, just she's very discerning, very aware, and for her to start bringing these things up, independent of me telling her anything, was to me, just another clear indicator. I think the things that happened after, so like get off the phone, call, because the first thing she said, so who are you going to call? Dan Crowley. So we called Pastor Dan, and he just said, hey, tell me about the phone call. And then the next thing he said was, very simple, how's the little girl doing? And I said, I don't know. I haven't even thought about that because we're so freaked out over what we experienced in our own home, haven't had a chance to reach out. And so called the family, and they said it was a night and day difference after we got off the phone.
Sure.
That just in that 3 days, she's been warm, she's been loving, she's been engaging to the family. Just a night and day difference. Yeah. And they said, thank you so much for praying with us. How...
And I'm guessing it's not their first strategy, right? As good, loving parents, I'm guessing they had tried some other options.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
That clearly weren't effective until this one was,
Right. Yeah. And so they asked, how's your week been? And I go, it's been interesting.
Yeah.
And so I shared with them, and I remember the mom getting emotional and saying, I knew it was something more. I knew it was something else.
Wow.
And I remember the sense of just that overwhelming sense of joy that we had, that wow, through that opportunity of just invoking Christ and God in that situation, that we were able to just help a family that had been struggling with something for so long.
Yeah. Yeah, I think one other thing that I think about is that it's consistent with the God that we believe in as Christians, revealed in Jesus Christ, that he would want to liberate and free a little girl who's experiencing darkness and evil that she had nothing to do with. She was born into, she inherited whatever curses, whatever the effects, the implications of her biological family's Satan worship, essentially. And wouldn't a good God want to set a little girl free from that? To have the kind of compassion, and not only compassion, but really the power and the authority to liberate a girl like that in the first place. Yeah, one thing that I think is important, because our approach has always been just a really simple one that's empowering to people who are experiencing these kinds of things, where you don't have to be a professional or a priest or whatever. There's no formulaic prayer to pray. Because I remember early on, you're like, guys, I'm kind of leaning in on you. I don't know what I'm doing here. And we're like, it's okay. Yeah. You'll see that it's pretty straightforward, and it's not hocus pocus. It's not Hollywood exorcism with head spinning. It's speaking and declaring the truth of God, His word, and which really just communicates love for this girl, for this family, to bring peace and light into their home. And so one thing that I think is important, though, is we've talked about in this Real Spirituality series, we're touching on this idea that there is a real war or a battle that's taking place, and how while there are opposing forces, that they're not equal. And so one of the things that we believe is that it's important to once you've engaged with the enemy, that you kind of finish the process with just a prayer of protection, right? That if some of these things that we're assuming by faith are true, that there's this war, and when the kingdom of God, when that kingdom that is a kingdom of it's a good kingdom, it's a kingdom of things that are just, and things that are true and right and peaceful and all of that. That when that comes, it upsets the darkness, and when we gain back that territory, if we have a real enemy, he's not going to be happy about that. And so, what I just recommend is, as you engage in what some Christians call deliverance or spiritual warfare, just to simply say a prayer. God, protect us. God, we know that, and we believe that we've taken back some territory, but to just say, hey, like there's no space here anymore.
Right.
Like we're closing the doors to this house. The windows are shut. There's nothing that can enter. And it reminds me of a passage that I think about in this context. Luke 11 it tells a story about an evil spirit who's dwelling in a house, and that house is really just a metaphor for the human person. So the Bible will refer to you or to me as a house, and this evil spirit gets kicked out. And it says that the spirit leaves and it goes to find another place to reside. We've talked about how the enemy and these evil spirits need something to attach to. Mm-hmm. And so it goes looking for a place and doesn't find one. And so the spirit finds 7 spirits stronger than itself, herself. I don't know if they're gendered, but that's a whole nother topic. It comes back with 7 others and finds the house clean and swept and in order, which is really interesting, right? You'd think like, oh, like the havoc that this spirit wreaked has been fixed. It's cleaned up. It's good. But it's not occupied. It's empty. And so it's sort of like this vacuum got created, and it comes back stronger. It says that person's condition is worse than the first. And the principle, I believe, that Jesus is teaching us there is that it's one thing to just sort of get rid of the bad stuff, right? To clean house. Right. But it's another thing to fill the house back up with what is good, right, and true, with the Spirit of the living God, the one true Spirit that brings life. And so I think that's one of those things that, especially for at the time you were younger in your faith, yeah, still a little bit newer and learning some of these things. But let me ask you, in light of that, what would you have thought of this before you came to faith? If you had heard a story like this, what would your initial reaction be, and how has this experience changed that?
Yeah, it would have. And this might sound kind of crazy, but I almost feel like the experience was needed. There needed to be that demonstration because this is the path that we're on, the calling that I'm in, and I want to be able to walk with people through this. But yeah, even in my past career, I dealt with a lot of people saying a lot of different things, and I would have heard something like this and completely disregarded it. Yeah. Completely. Yeah. And it was, we were raised Catholic, so that was something that was always very clear. Like you're not messing with spirits or demons. I remember the first time I heard about a Ouija board, my mom was like, "That's the devil." Like you're not messing with that anyway. So there's already a natural fear. Yeah. But not because of anything I had experienced, but just because it just didn't feel right. Sure. But if somebody had shared this with me before without maybe absent the experience, like, yeah, even at the time hearing, like, are we sure that that's what it is? Because sure, you hear so much in the news, like, yeah, maybe certain people need to be medicated over things, or maybe there's just something else. Yep. But it was, not something that I would have really taken as seriously as I would now. I mean, that's something that when somebody can come to you now and go, "Hey, I'm really experiencing these things," it's not something that you wait to take a second look at. You actually engage then and there. Yeah,
and I think it's okay for us, by the way, to look to some of the more natural or physical explanations, like even to consider those first. If I had a nightmare from the Lord, I'm not saying that was a demon necessarily. It could have been the pizza I ate, right? Which I didn't eat pizza last night, but you get the idea, you know. And I read an article recently, a really fascinating article about a board certified psychiatrist. This is a doctor who's competent in his field and deals with a lot of mental illness and a lot of other things. And I loved how reasonable he was about it. And he kind of is in this unique category that reminds me of a bit of where we're at. This guy happened to also be a Catholic, and so he has the belief structure to kind of support it. But I think it's the kind of position that's sort of intriguing and curious, because he said, man, as a board certified psychiatrist, I have been brought in by the Catholic Church. Now he's been doing this for quite a while, and to assess a situation. And basically what they're asking for me to do is eliminate that this is a medical cause or condition. And he said most of the time it's not about demons. It's about something else.
Right.
But he's not denying the reality. In some cases, that's the only category we have left that we can go to. And I think that's important to consider.
I think because most people want to be able to explain it.
Sure.
Like, oh, that was the pizza you ate last night. Oh, you have a history of family members with mental illness. Yes. So that's an easier fix for us.
Yeah. And I think part of what we're trying to communicate is we do have a category that helps explain things that are otherwise unexplainable.
Right.
And this category is one that simply says that there are forces in our world that are unseen, that are not good, that are really about death and destruction and the opposite of what our good God has for us. And so, that's good stuff.
So, Pastor Dan, when I called him, one of the first things he asked, well, did you guys pray when you got off the phone? And I said, no, we were kind of just like, good game, and hung up. And I went right back to the family and about my business. Yeah. And that was a strong point he brought back is, no, you have to seal this in prayer. You have to remember what you just engaged, what you did, and you have to seal it. Yeah. And it was like, it landed because of what we had just experienced. It was like, that's something we need to do. And now, like, we've had a couple of experiences like this together, and that's something we start with and end with, is making sure that we pray out and together before we leave. Yeah, it reminds me of something I read recently. Lecrae was responding to a post, a picture of another artist sort of laying on the ground inside of a pentagram, and he this line in the caption was just really profound. He said, "Don't play with the devil, because the devil will play back." Yep. And I think that oftentimes, unknowingly, so many people engage things that they just don't know the power and the dark nature and the potential for things that they're engaging, that on the front end they might not fully even realize, or they're searching for something, or they're lonely, or they're needing meaning, or they know that there's something to reality that is transcendent, and they want to tap into that. And just to as a fair warning, I mean, just to be careful with what you're playing with, to be careful what you're engaging, because there is a reality that's out there, and there's a safe place to engage it. There's a safe way to engage it, and that's with the authority and the power of Jesus, and the ability to call on His name and knowing that He's going to hear us and respond. So, man, I want to thank you for joining us for this conversation, for sharing your story. And if you want to engage with us, if you have any questions or you want to share your own story, man, just feel free to drop that in the comments. And thanks for being with us today.